someone quietly canceled the show, and the powers that be at Netflix. I am not going to base my life on having television. And so I pulled the plug. That was it. I walked away.
Ian Somerhalder did not disappear because Hollywood forgot him. He disappeared because Hollywood reminded him exactly how little control a star can really have. After playing Damon Salvatore on the Vampire Diaries, he tried to build a new chapter with Netflix's V-Wars. Instead, the show became the breaking point. One canceled series, one exhausted body, and one conversation with himself later, Ian walked away from the industry that made him famous. The vampire who could not escape his own shadow. For nearly a decade, Ian Somerhalder was Damon Salvatore. That is the kind of role actors dream about and fear at the same time. On the Vampire Diaries, Damon was seductive, dangerous, funny, wounded, cruel, loyal, and endlessly watchable. He was the kind of character fans did not simply like. They obsessed over him. From 2009 to 2017, Ian became one of the most recognizable faces on television. And for millions of viewers, his smirk, his delivery, and his chemistry with Nina Dobrev and Paul Wesley became inseparable from the entire identity of the show. But there is a hidden cost to becoming that recognizable in one role. The audience loves you for something very specific, and the industry slowly begins to see you through the same narrow lens. If you played a charming vampire for 8 seasons, Hollywood does not always ask what else you can do. It asks how many more versions of that same energy it can sell. Ian had built a global fan base, but he had also built a prison around himself. The thing that made him famous became the thing he had to escape. That is why his next major move mattered so much. After The Vampire Diaries ended, Ian did not want to simply become Damon again under another name. He wanted a project that let him step into a different position, not just as the beautiful supernatural lead, but as someone with more creative control, more responsibility, and more ownership over what reached the screen. That is where V-Wars entered the story. The Netflix show that was supposed to be his reset. V-Wars should have been Ian Somerhalder's perfect transition. It was still connected to vampires, which meant fans would understand the bridge, but it put him in a different role. He was not playing the vampire this time. He was playing Dr. Luther Swan, a scientist pulled into a world where a mysterious outbreak begins transforming people. On paper, that was a smart move. It allowed Ian to keep the genre audience that loved him while proving he could stand in a different place inside that mythology. But behind the scenes, the project became much heavier than a simple acting job. Ian later explained that he moved his whole family to Northern Ontario for the show and worked intensely on it for nearly a year. That detail matters because it shows the cost before the public ever saw a single episode. This was not a quick cameo or a casual streaming experiment. He uprooted his life, brought Nikki Reed and their family into the rhythm of production, and poured himself into a show that he believed could become the next chapter of his career. The problem was that the first version of the show reportedly did not match what he believed it needed to be. According to Ian, when he saw early cuts, he was so unhappy with what had been turned in that he did not want his name on it. That is a brutal moment for an actor. A star can promote a flawed project and hope the audience forgives it, or they can fight behind the scenes to fix it. Ian chose to fight, and that fight, by his own account, became the beginning of the end. The reshoots that broke him. Ian has said he raised millions of dollars to help reshape V-Wars, pushing for more creative control and trying to rescue the final product. He described filming hours of extra footage in a very short period, working under extreme pressure, and eventually ending up in the hospital after his body shut down. That part of the story changes everything. From the outside, a canceled Netflix show sounds like normal Hollywood business. Shows get canceled all the time. But from Ian's side, this was not just a project disappearing from a streaming menu. It was a year of his life, his family's time, his money, his health, and his credibility. This is the strongest part of the example script because it makes the cancellation feel personal instead of procedural. Netflix did not just cancel a show. In Ian's mind, the system canceled the proof of what he had sacrificed. He had tried to fix the work, tried to save the show, tried to deliver something he could stand behind, and then watched decisions above him erase the future anyway. That was the lesson he could not ignore. Fame did not protect him. A massive fan base did not protect him. Years of experience did not protect him. Even pouring his body, money, and creative energy into a project did not guarantee that the people at the top would treat it the way he believed it deserved. And once he saw that clearly, Ian seemed to realize he did not want to keep living inside a business where someone else could always pull the plug. The cancellation that made him walk away. When V-Wars premiered in December 2019, Ian believed it performed strongly around the world. But in 2020, Netflix canceled it after one season. To fans, that was disappointing. To Ian, it was final. He later described the cancellation as the moment he pulled the plug on his acting career. Not because one show failed, but because the experience showed him that his life and livelihood could still be dictated by executives who did not carry the same personal cost. That is the real reason he vanished from Hollywood. It was not laziness. It was not lack of opportunity. It was not that fans stopped caring. It was a choice made after an industry experience that felt too costly to repeat. Ian had already given television 8 seasons of his life on The Vampire Diaries. He had already experienced the intensity of fame, fan expectations, long production schedules, and the strange pressure of being publicly frozen as one character. V-Wars was supposed to prove that the next chapter could be different. Instead, it proved to him that the machine was still the same. The new insight here is that Ian's exit was not a rejection of work. It was a rejection of dependency. He did not want to build the rest of his life around waiting for a network, a streamer, or an executive to decide whether his work was valuable. He wanted to move from permission-based success to ownership-based success. That is why his next chapter looks so different. The life he built with Nikki Reed. Ian did not walk away into emptiness. He walked into a life he had already been building with Nikki Reed. Nikki understood the pressure of Hollywood herself. She had been part of the Twilight franchise, another massive vampire universe with a global fan base and intense public attention. That matters because she was not an outsider watching Ian struggle with fame. She knew what it felt like to be attached to a fantasy franchise, to be recognized through one world, and to have the industry turn identity into a product. Together, Ian and Nikki shifted toward family, business, sustainability, and farm life outside the traditional Hollywood rhythm. Reports have described them raising their children on a farm outside Los Angeles, caring for animals, practicing regenerative agriculture, and building companies around health, wellness, and environmental ideas. For some fans, that sounded like a dramatic change. But for Ian, it may have felt more honest than another soundstage. The farm life was not just a celebrity aesthetic. It connected to ideas Ian had been talking about for years: soil health, sustainability, climate, food systems, and the need to repair the planet from the ground up. He had been involved with documentaries like Kiss the Ground and Common Ground, projects built around regenerative agriculture and the idea that soil can become part of the climate solution. That is a very different kind of mission from playing a vampire on television. But it also reveals why Ian's exit makes sense. He was no longer chasing immortality on screen. He was trying to build something living. Brothers bond and the Paul Wesley connection. One of the smartest moves Ian made after The Vampire Diaries was not running away from the show's legacy completely. He carried part of it into a business he could actually own. In 2021, he and Paul Wesley launched Brothers Bond Bourbon, a brand rooted in their real friendship and the fictional brotherhood fans loved between Damon and Stefan Salvatore. That was a clever bridge between past and future. It allowed Ian to honor the audience that made him famous while creating something outside acting. Brothers Bond was not just a random celebrity label slapped onto a bottle. Ian and Paul talked about building it themselves, developing the blend, shaping the brand, and connecting it to values they cared about. Over time, the company expanded into more states, more expressions, and eventually regenerative grain work. That detail matters because it shows how Ian's interests started joining together. The Vampire Diaries gave him the audience. Brothers Bond gave him ownership. Regenerative agriculture gave the brand a deeper mission. This is the difference between being a hired face and being a builder. As Damon Salvatore, Ian was the face of a network hit. As a business founder, he became part of the decision-making structure. He was not waiting for a streamer to renew him. He was not waiting for a role. He was not asking Hollywood to tell him what came next. That kind of control seems to be exactly what he wanted after V-Wars. Why Hollywood no longer looked worth it. Hollywood can look glamorous from the outside, but for a working actor, especially one coming off a giant television role, the reality can be exhausting. There are auditions, development meetings, contracts, table reads, promotional tours, long shoots, uncertain renewals, and projects that can disappear even after months of sacrifice. The public often imagines stars as powerful because they see the fame, the red carpets, and the fans. But many actors are still employees inside a system run by studios, streamers, executives, financiers, release schedules, and algorithms. No matter how famous you are, someone above you can still decide whether your project lives or dies. Ian had already experienced the best version of that system. The Vampire Diaries was not just successful. It was a cultural hit that made him wealthy, famous, and beloved by fans around the world. But once you have already lived through the highest version of TV stardom, the next project has to justify the cost. V-Wars did not just disappoint him, it clarified the risk. He could move his family, spend years fighting for a project, push his body past its limit, and still lose control at the end. That is why his quote about not letting television or streaming executives dictate how he made a living hits so hard. It sounds controversial because actors are often expected to be grateful for the machine, even when the machine drains them. Ian was saying the quiet part out loud. He had seen what Hollywood could give him, but he had also seen what it could take. And by the time he had a family, a farm, businesses, and a different mission, the old bargain no longer looked worth it. The fans who kept waiting for Damon to return. For years, fans kept asking where Ian Somerhalder went. Some wanted him back in the Vampire Diaries universe. Some wanted him in another supernatural drama. Some expected him to return to acting once enough time had passed. That expectation makes sense. When someone plays a character as beloved as Damon Salvatore, fans do not easily accept that the actor might be finished. To them, the story still feels open because the emotional attachment never ended. But Ian's silence was not an accident. He was not simply between roles. He was reorganizing his life. That is the part fans sometimes struggle to understand. The viewer's relationship with an actor is based on memory and desire. The actor's life is based on time, health, family, and choice. Fans may want one more Damon moment, one more reunion, one more vampire story, one more interview where the old chemistry returns. Ian may look at the same opportunity and see months away from his children, more dependence on executives, and another round of pressure he no longer wants. That does not mean he hates the fans or the role. In fact, his continued friendship and business partnership with Paul Wesley suggests the opposite. He knows what the Vampire Diaries gave him. He just does not seem willing to let that role control the rest of his life. The real reason he vanished. So why did Ian Somerhalder vanish from Hollywood after the Vampire Diaries? The simple answer is V-Wars. The deeper answer is that V-Wars exposed a truth he could no longer ignore. He had already given years of his life to television. He had already carried a massive show. He had already experienced the highs of fandom and the exhaustion behind them. When he tried to create a new chapter, he found himself spending money, risking his health, moving his family, and still ending up at the mercy of people who could cancel the future with one decision. That experience forced a question. If he already had fame, a family, businesses, land, purpose, and a platform, why keep handing control of his livelihood to Hollywood? For Ian, the answer seemed obvious. He did not need to keep chasing the thing he had already achieved. He needed to build a life that could not be canceled after one season. That is the original twist. Ian Somerhalder did not quit because Hollywood rejected him. He quit because he rejected the old deal. The industry had trained actors to believe visibility was everything. Ian discovered that ownership, health, family, and purpose mattered more. The man who chose soil over spotlight. The image is almost too perfect. For years, Ian played a vampire, a character built around immortality, temptation, and living forever outside the normal rhythm of life. Now, his public life revolves around soil, farming, family, animals, and building things that grow slowly. That contrast is the soul of the story. He went from a world where everything was lit, styled, edited, and sold, to a world where results come from patience, seasons, and daily work. That does not mean his new life is simple or without business ambition. Brothers Bond, the absorption company, regenerative agriculture work, documentaries, and public advocacy are all still forms of influence. But they are different kinds of influence. They are not built around waiting for a casting call. They are built around ownership and mission. Ian did not leave public life entirely. He changed what he wanted his public life to be used for. At 47, that decision feels less like retirement and more like a reset. He is not the young actor trying to prove he belongs in Hollywood anymore. He is a husband, father, entrepreneur, and environmental advocate who already lived through the peak of teen drama fame and decided not to spend the rest of his life trying to recreate it. Why his exit still surprises people. Ian's exit surprises people because most stars do the opposite. They fight to stay visible. They take roles just to remain in the conversation. They accept weak projects because disappearing feels dangerous. Hollywood teaches actors that if they stop, the industry will move on. Ian seems to have accepted that risk and chosen peace anyway. That is rare, especially after a role as big as Damon Salvatore. He could have spent the next decade chasing variations of the same character. He could have taken every supernatural script that landed on his desk. He could have turned fan nostalgia into constant appearances and easy attention. Instead, he walked toward a life that made less sense to the entertainment machine, but more sense to him. That is why we now know why he vanished. It was not one dramatic scandal. It was the accumulation of everything. The long Vampire Diaries run, the desire to escape Damon's shadow, the exhausting fight over V-Wars, the cancellation, the hospitalization, the family move, the farm, Nikki Reed, Paul Wesley, Brothers Bond, and the realization that Hollywood no longer deserved to be the center of his life. In the end, Ian Somerhalder did not vanish from Hollywood because the audience stopped caring. He vanished because he stopped wanting his life to depend on an industry that could take years of work, millions of dollars, physical exhaustion, and family sacrifice, then erase the future with one cancellation. The Vampire Diaries made him famous. V-Wars made him reconsider the cost. And the life he built with Nikki Reed, from farm work to business ventures to Brothers Bond with Paul Wesley, gave him something Hollywood could not offer: control. So what do you think? Did Ian make the right decision by walking away from acting after V Wars? Or should he return to Hollywood one more time for the fans who still miss Damon Salvatore? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about the real reasons famous stars disappeared from the spotlight, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one.